Hi everybody. Today we are working on rounding decimals. So way back in September, we worked on rounding regular numbers to the nearest 10, to the nearest 100, to the nearest 1,000. With decimals, we're going to be working on rounding to the nearest 10th, 10 with the TH, and the nearest 1. So I'm going to do an example of both. So first one is the nearest 1. Now, when I say the nearest 1, I mean whatever number's in the ones place. So I have 5 and 81/100ths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my ones place, which is always the first spot before the decimal. So I'm going to underline the 5, okay? And remember, when I round, I always have to look to my number to the right. So I'm looking at my 8. The same rule applies for rounding decimals to rounding normal numbers. So 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So I'm looking at my 8 because that's going to decide whether my 5 soars or if it rests. So I look at the 8, I think, is that 5 or more or 4 or less? It's 5 or more. So my 6 is going to soar up 1 and become a 6. Any number after the decimal becomes a 0, okay? So then the nearest one, it would be 6, okay? I want to show you what that would look like if there were 2 digits here. So let's do... So I have 16 and 73/100ths. Once again, I'm rounding to the nearest 1. The 1 is the spot before the decimal. So I'm going to underline that 6. Once again, my rule, 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. But I have to look at my number to the right. So I'm going to be looking at my 7. I'm going to think, is this 5 or more or 4 or less? This is 5 or more. So the 6 is going to soar up 1. So it becomes a 7. And the numbers to the right become zeros. And remember, the numbers to the left stay the same. So it becomes 17. Okay? Now I'm going to do a number to the nearest 10th. So we have 1 and 92/100ths. Now the 10th place is one spot after the decimal, okay? So in this case, it's the 9. But remember, we can't just decide whether the 9 will soar or rest based on the 9 alone. We have to look to our number to the right. So I'm going to look at my 2. I'm going to think, 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. Is a 2 5 or more or 4 or less? The 2 is 4 or less. So the 9 rests, meaning it stays the same. So I'm going to bring down the 9. Any number after that to the right becomes a 0. And any number to the left becomes a 1. So you have 1 and 90/100ths. Okay, I'm going to do one more example similar to what we did up at the top. So I have 22 and 46/100ths. So I'm going to round to the nearest 10th. Remember, your 10th place is the spot right after the decimal. So in this case, it's the 4. The 4, we can't decide whether it's going to soar or rest by itself. We have to look at its neighbor, the 6. So I'm going to look at the 6. I'm going to say, is that 5 or more or is that 4 or less? 6 is 5 or more. So the 4 is going to soar up 1 and become a 5. This place value becomes a 0. And the numbers before stay the same. So you have 22 and 50/100ths. Okay? If you guys have any questions, I'll be on Zoom today. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye.